My name's Emma Jack, and I have a son, Liam, who's 20 and off at college right now. We've been scrimping and saving for years to keep him there, cutting corners, skipping vacations, you name it, so he could have a shot at something bigger. We live in the house my grandmother left us when she moved into a nursing home. It's large, comfy, but nothing fancy, just feels like home. Jack works at the local hardware store, and I manage the front desk at a doctor's office. We make do, living a no-frills kind of life, and that's just fine by us. It was a Thursday afternoon, the sun hanging just right, making you think about calling it a day early. But then Jack's phone rang, cutting through any thoughts of an early weekend. I was chopping carrots, mind half on dinner, half on a list of bills that needed paying when I heard him answer. "Hello? Mom, slow down. What's wrong?" His face went white as he listened. I stopped what I was doing, towel in hand, watching him pace. He ended the call looking shaken. "That was my dad," he said, sinking into the couch like his strings had been cut. "Their business tanked, bankrupt. They've lost everything, even the house." My heart sank. "Oh, Jack, that's terrible. What are they planning to do?" "They want to come stay with us, just for a bit," he said, "till they sort something out." I hesitated, thinking about our already tight budget, the quiet order of our life that was about to be appended. "And what did you tell them?" He rubbed his neck, a sure sign he was stressed. "Told them I'd talk to you first. It's your house, Emma. Wouldn't just spring that on you without checking." Jack's parents, Frank and Helen, they weren't the easygoing type. High flyers used to the good life, and our simple setup was miles from what they were accustomed to. "You know how they are, Jack. This house, it ain't their style." I know," he looked uneasy. "But they're my folks, Em. They're stuck." Thinking of all the times they visited, noses turned up at our modest living, it was clear they'd be like fish out of water here. But then, picturing them desperate enough to ask for help, my resolve softened. "All right, they can come, but it's temporary, right? Just till they're back on their feet?" He picked up his phone, dialed, and after a short, muffled exchange, "Mom, Emma, and I talked it over. You can crash here for a bit, but just till you find a place. Got it?" We're not running a hotel. I couldn't hear what was said on the other end, but Jack's tight-lipped, "Yes, Mom, we're clear," gave me the gist. He hung up and exhaled long and hard. "They're thankful, Em. They'll be here next week." Last week, Jack told his folks they could stay with us for a bit, and today, they were moving in. I watched from the porch as two huge trucks rolled up our driveway, and I swear my heart sank. Jack was out there directing traffic like some parking lot attendant, trying to keep a smile plastered on his face. Frank was the first to barrel out of the car, a big grin on his face, clapping Jack on the back so hard you'd think he'd won the lottery and not just moved into his son's house. "Emma, darling," Helen swept up to me, all perfumed and peppy, planting a kiss on my cheek that felt more like a branding iron. "You're an angel for letting us invade like this." I forced a smile, my eyes darting to the mountain of stuff they were unloading. "It's no problem, Helen. But is this all of it?" "Oh, this is just the essentials." She waved a dismissive hand, as if the pile of furniture and boxes wasn't already swallowing our front yard. "The rest we'll put in storage, essentials." I bit my tongue to keep from saying anything rash. If these were essentials, I dreaded to think what they'd left behind. Jack caught my eye, and I could tell he was thinking the same thing. "Let's get this stuff inside then," Jack said, more to himself than anyone else. Frank and Helen directed the movers with the kind of authority you'd think they were moving into a palace, not our modest little home. The mover shuffled past, hauling armchairs, countless boxes, and, would you believe it, a grandfather clock. Who needs a grandfather clock in their temporary home? "Right there, boys," Frank directed, pointing at various spots around our living room, which was rapidly disappearing under a sea of their belongings. I pulled Jack aside while the movers took a breather. "Jack, this is crazy. They brought enough to furnish a whole house. Where are we going to put all this?" Jack rubbed his temples. I know, I'll talk to them. Okay, let's just get through today." We retreated as the movers continued their work. The whole ground floor was turning into a replica of Frank and Helen's old house, every corner filled, every space taken over. By the time the movers were done, our once cozy living room looked more like a storage unit. Dinner that night was a chaotic affair. We barely found the table under all the clutter. Frank and Helen seemed oblivious to the mess, chatting away about their journey here. "Emma, you really should try this wine," Frank said, popping open a bottle of something French and probably more expensive than our entire grocery budget for the week. "We're so grateful to you both," Helen chimed in, her voice sugary enough to give you cavities. "It's just till we find our feet." "Yeah, about that," Jack started, clearing his throat. "We need to talk about some ground rules. Space is tight and—" "Oh, don't worry about it, son," Frank waved him off. "We'll manage just fine, won't we, dear?" He smiled at Helen, who nodded enthusiastically. I looked around at our invaded space, the piles of boxes, the fancy ornaments crowding out our simple decorations. "Manage just fine," I repeated to myself. I wasn't so sure about that. Living with Frank and Helen had been an adjustment, to put it mildly. A few days have passed since they moved in, and just when I thought we'd settled into some kind of routine, the kitchen became the new battleground. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was fixing dinner like usual. Something simple and hearty. Spaghetti with a homemade tomato sauce. I was stirring the pot when Helen walked into the kitchen, her nose wrinkling as if she just walked into a barn. "What's that smell?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's dinner," I replied, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. "Spaghetti night." "Spaghetti?" she scoffed, peering over my shoulder. "Where's the meat, the fresh herbs? This is what you feed us, Jack?" Hearing the commotion, Jack wandered in, drying his hands on a dish towel. "What's the problem?" His mom turned to him with a look that could curdle milk. "The problem, Jack, is that we're expected to eat this." She gestured at the bubbling pot. "This slop." I took a deep breath, trying not to let her get to me. "It's what we usually eat. We can't afford steaks and fancy meals every night." Jack stepped between us, his face set in hard lines. "Mom, this is Emma's house, and this is what we eat. If you want something else, you're welcome to cook for yourselves." "Oh, we will," Helen retorted, her eyes narrowing. "And we expect you to provide the groceries we require. We're not used to living like this." I'd had enough. "Look, I'm sorry you're used to different, but this is what we can manage. Our budget doesn't stretch to luxuries." Frank, who'd been silent up till then, chimed in, his voice booming. "Then perhaps you need to reevaluate your budget, young lady. We're not animals to feed on scraps." Jack's jaw clenched. "Dad, that's enough. We're doing the best we can." The room was thick with tension, everyone's shoulders up around their ears. Finally, Helen huffed. "Fine. Tomorrow we'll give you a list of what we eat. You can make sure it's here." The next day, true to her word, Helen handed me a list. Marbled beef, fresh seafood, organic this, imported that. I looked at the list, my heart sinking. That evening, we sat down with Frank and Helen, the list between us on the kitchen table. "We expect proper meals," Frank declared. "Steaks from marbled beef or the finest fish." "We can't swing that," Jack said, his voice firm but weary. "That's just not in our budget." Their response was swift and harsh. "Lazy, both of you," Helen snapped. "Can't even provide a decent meal." In the end, feeling cornered, I caved to their demands. I started buying only the highest quality products for them, while Jack and I got by on fast food just to save costs. A month later, I sat down to crunch the numbers, and my heart nearly stopped. Our food expenses had doubled, and to top it off, Helen's daily luxurious baths had sent our water bill through the roof. Dinner had become a battlefield, but tonight was different. Frank and Helen were digging into some lavish dishes they'd insisted on buying, marbled steaks and imported fish. Meanwhile, Jack and I sat across from them, our plates filled with the simple pasta we could afford. The disparity wasn't just on our plates, it was drawing a deeper line between us every day. As they savored another bite of their expensive meals, I couldn't hold back any longer. "This has got to stop," I said, the words heavy in the air. Helen looked up, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What are you talking about now?" "We can't keep living like this, eating separately, different meals. It's ridiculous. From now on, everyone in this house eats the same, and we're sticking to what we can afford." Frank laughed, a harsh sound that grated on my nerves. "You expect us to eat that slop?" "It's not slop. It's dinner. It's what we eat," I shot back, my patience fraying. The laughter vanished from Frank's face, replaced by a scowl. Helen chimed in, her tone sharp and accusing. "How can you be so greedy and lazy? Cooking decent food isn't that hard." They both turned to Jack, their expressions full of expectation. "You're going to let her talk to us like this in your own house?" That was the last straw. Jack's hand slammed down on the table, making the plates jump. "First off, this is Emma's house, and you will treat her with respect." The impact of his words hit hard. Helen's eyes filled with tears, her voice quivering. "I never expected you to raise your voice at me, your own mother." Frank's anger boiled over as he stood, pointing an accusing finger at Jack. "Look at you, henpecked and dancing to her tune. Is this what you've become?" I stood my ground, though my heart was pounding. "Enough. This conversation is over. From today, no more expensive steaks or fish. We eat the same. All of us." Their looks could have frozen the room for a moment. No one moved. Then, without a word, Frank and Helen pushed back from the table and left. Jack and I sat back down, the silence hanging heavy between us. He reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. "I'm sorry it had to come to this," he said. "I am too," I replied, feeling the weight of the evening settle around us. "But it's the right thing. We can't live like this." After the big blow-up at dinner, things cooled down, but only on the surface. Frank and Helen were quieter, sure, but there was a tenseness to their silence that put me on edge. I had a feeling they weren't going to take the new house rules lying down. And I was right. It started subtly a few days later. I was cleaning up after a lunch of sandwiches when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and headed to the front door, expecting maybe a package or a neighbor. But when I opened it, there stood a delivery guy holding a large aromatic bag from some high-end restaurant in town. "Delivery for Emma," he said, glancing at his clipboard. I was puzzled. There must be some mistake. "I didn't order this," I said. Just then Helen appeared behind me, her smile a bit too wide. "Oh, I took the liberty of ordering for us. I thought we deserved a nice meal after all the recent discomfort," she said. I frowned, taking the bag hesitantly. "Helen, we talked about this. We're cutting back on expenses." She shrugged, her eyes avoiding mine. "I thought it was on your tab, dear." "My mistake." Jack walked in from the kitchen, overhearing us. "What's going on?" he asked. "Your mother decided we deserved an expensive lunch," I said, the weight of the bag suddenly feeling heavier in my hands. Jack's expression hardened. "Mom, we agreed no more of this." Frank stepped into the hallway, his voice booming. "What's a little lunch going to hurt? You can't expect us to live like monks forever." I set the bag down on the entranceway table, feeling the frustration bubble up. "It's not just lunch. It's every meal, every extra expense. We can't afford this. We told you we're sticking to a budget. Helen's face turned cold. Well, if you're going to make such a fuss over a simple meal, I suppose we won't bother next time. Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. It's not just about the meal. It's about respecting the rules of the house. You can't keep going behind our backs. The conversation went in circles for a few more minutes, until Frank and Helen retreated to their room, leaving the uneaten, expensive lunch on the table. Jack and I looked at each other, the unspoken agreement hanging between us that this couldn't go on. I'll call the restaurant, explain the situation, and cancel any future orders made without our consent, I said, picking up the phone. Jack nodded, his jaw set. I'll talk to them again. This sneaky stuff has to stop. The peace was short-lived. After the incident with the unauthorized lunch, Helen and Frank seemed to simmer just below the surface, and you could cut the tension in the house with a knife. I was washing dishes one evening when the calm shattered once again. Jack had just come in from the yard, looking weary. I was about to ask him about his day when the loud crash from the living room had us both running. We found Frank standing over a broken vase, one of the few decorations I really cared about. What happened here? Jack asked, trying to keep his voice level. It slipped, Frank said, barely looking regretful. Accidents happen, but his tone was all wrong. It wasn't apologetic. It was defiant. Jack bent down to pick up the pieces, and I couldn't help but say, "This vase was from my grandmother. It's been here longer than I have." Helen scoffed from the doorway. "It's just a vase. You can get another." "That's not the point, Helen," I snapped, feeling my frustration rise. "The point is respect, something that's clearly lacking here." "You want to talk about respect?" Frank shot back, his voice raising. "What about respecting us? Treating us like second-class citizens in this house?" Jack stood up, facing his father. "You're living here by our goodwill, Dad. Remember that. It doesn't feel like goodwill." Helen chimed in, her words sharp. "It feels like we're unwelcome." Every day felt like walking on a tightrope with Frank and Helen in our house. But one evening pushed me past my breaking point. We were sitting around the dinner table, the same place that had witnessed countless arguments. Now, when Helen casually dropped her latest bombshell, Jack's face fell. "Darling, I found this lovely coat today, and I think we should buy it using the college fund you've set up for Liam," she said, as if suggesting we switch brands of coffee. I choked on my water, coughing as I set my glass down hard on the table. "What did you just say?" I managed, my voice a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Helen smiled sweetly, clearly mistaking my shock for compliance. "It's just money, dear. Liam can always take out loans for college. I really need a new coat." Jack, who'd been quietly seething beside me, slammed his fork down. "Mom, that's out of the question. That money is for our son's education. We're not using it for anything else." Helen's face twisted into a scowl. "How can you deny your own mother a simple request?" "It's not simple, and that's final," I snapped, feeling the last of my patience evaporate. Frank chimed in, his voice raised to a shout. "You're both being unreasonable and cruel. We're your family." The threat came next, his voice cold and calculated. "Maybe the local press would be interested to know how you treat your family. What about your bosses, huh? Would they like to know?" I felt a mix of fury and fear churn in my stomach, but I knew we couldn't cave. "Enough!" I shouted back, standing up. "This is not how family treats each other. You two need to find another place to live. This isn't working." Helen burst into tears, playing the victim, while Frank continued to hurl accusations and threats. The dinner ended with them storming out of the room, leaving Jack and me in stunned silence. Once the house was quiet, I retreated to the bedroom and dialed my grandmother. She picked up after a few rings, her voice a comforting presence. "Grandma, it's Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "What's wrong, dear?" she asked, her tone immediately alert. I poured out everything, the demands, the threats, the impossible situation with Helen and Frank. She listened without interrupting, her quiet hums a steady reassurance in the background. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Then, decisively, she said, "I'll come to stay with you for a couple of months." "Are you sure, Grandma? What about the nursing home?" "I'm sure. It sounds like you need me there, and I'm not one to sit by when my family is in trouble," she declared, her voice resolute. When Grandma arrived, it was like a gust of fresh air swept through the house. She might have been older and moved a little slower, but her spirit was as fiery as ever. Frank and Helen were visibly put off by her sudden presence, their discomfort clear as day. "I'll be staying on the ground floor," Grandma declared firmly the moment she rolled through the door, her suitcase following behind her like a loyal companion. "I expect some things will need to be moved." Frank tried to mask his irritation with a forced smile. "Of course we'll make you comfortable, won't we, Helen?" Helen nodded stiffly, her eyes darting around, probably calculating what they'd need to shift or hide away. I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. Finally, someone was putting them in their place. As soon as the movers finished rearranging the furniture to make room for Grandma, she called a family meeting in the living room. "Now, I've heard quite a bit from Emma about what's been going on here, and I'm not pleased," she began, her tone stern, cutting through any pretense of pleasantries. Frank opened his mouth to protest, but Grandma raised her hand, silencing him. "I'm not done. This house is still mine, technically. And while I've allowed Emma and Jack to live here without rent, that doesn't extend to you two." The blood drained from Helen's face. "You want us to pay rent?" she sputtered. "Yes, I do. $4,000 a month," Grandma stated flatly. "That's outrageous," Frank exclaimed, standing up from his chair. "We can't afford that." "Well, considering the cost you've been racking up here, I'd say you can afford to cut back on your luxuries," Grandma shot back. "But we're family," Helen tried, her voice quivering slightly. "Family doesn't exploit each other," Grandma countered. "Since you've been enjoying a lifestyle beyond your means on my granddaughter's dime, I think it's only fair." Frank and Helen were at a loss for words, exchanging glances as if looking for an out but finding none. "And one more thing," Grandma continued. "If you think the rent is too high, you're welcome to find somewhere else to live. Or if you decide to stay, you'll provide me with daily assistance. I need help getting around, meals prepared, and someone to ensure I'm taken care of." Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Her earlier bravado evaporated completely. Frank, who had always prided himself on his independence, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "Think it over," Grandma finished, her voice softening just a tad. "I'll need your answer by tomorrow morning." As they retreated to their room, presumably to discuss their limited options, Grandma turned to us, her expression softening. "Don't you worry, kids. We'll sort this mess out." The morning after Grandma laid down her new house rules, it was like someone had flipped a switch in Frank and Helen. I walked into the kitchen to find them packing their things, a pile of boxes already forming at the door. "We've decided to move out," Frank announced, not looking up from the box he was sealing. "We found a small apartment. We'll take our things and go." Helen was quieter, busily stuffing things into bags, her movements sharp and quick. "It's for the best," she muttered, almost to herself but loud enough for me to hear.
I met her about a year ago, at a time when the restaurant I inherited from my father was on the brink of closing. It was losing customers fast. The restaurant is in a town near a popular tourist spot, something like Napa Valley. Tourists used to flood our town, making it a lively place. But a few years back, the town's train station became just a stop for the express line, which led to fewer tourists and a steep decline in customers. I was confident in the taste of my food and didn't want to shut down the restaurant without a fight. But I was out of ideas. To clear my head, I decided to spend a night at a hot springs hotel in the neighboring town of Sonoma, a place that also had ties to my father. As I was settling in, a young woman approached me and introduced herself as Catherine, the proprietor. "I'll bring your dinner with drinks and appetizers shortly, but the main dish may take a bit longer." "I hope you understand," she said. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Actually, one of our kitchen staff fell ill unexpectedly, so we're a bit short-handed. If it's an emergency, there's nothing we can do. Is the staff member okay?" "Yes, our head chef is conscious, but due to his age, we had to take precautions." I realized that the person she was referring to was the head chef, and the reason I chose this hotel was to taste his dishes. My late father and this chef had been apprentices together at the same fine dining restaurant. They often argued about the taste of the dishes and eventually had a falling out. My father opened his own restaurant, while the other became the head chef here. I often argued with my father about our restaurant's dishes too, but now, as I approached 40, I understood that chefs argue because they recognize each other's skills. The stubbornness and pride of a chef can lead to conflicts like this. I came to this hotel hoping to gain some insights for revitalizing my restaurant, but it seemed like I wouldn't get to taste the head chef's dishes after all. I couldn't help but wonder if my old man was somehow interfering from beyond the grave because he didn't like the idea of me using this place for inspiration. But even though they had a falling out, I knew my father wouldn't meddle like that. Catherine apologized again. "We will reduce your accommodation fee by 10% as a small compensation." A 10% discount? You kidding me? I thought to myself. The next morning, when I went to check out, I saw Catherine being bombarded by complaints from other guests, likely because of last night's dinner. "Cut it out, will you?" I snapped at one of the guests. "What's your problem? You ate all your dinner, right?" I ate it, but it was so late that my entire schedule got messed up. "Planning to go somewhere nice?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. "It's none of your business," the guest grumbled. "It was an emergency." "Understand that," I said firmly. Seeing me step in, the complainers seemed to give up. Feeling a bit smug, I gave a small smirk at Catherine, who was bowing her head in thanks. In the end, I returned home without finding any clues on how to revamp my restaurant. I had no choice but to keep running my modest business, catering to a few regular customers. One day, a man who looked to be around 70 walked into the restaurant. He wasn't much of a drinker, slowly savoring a warm bourbon while enjoying a few dishes. Occasionally, he'd nod approvingly and murmur, that's good." When I served him grilled chicken and soup as his last course, he seemed to enjoy the chicken but looked puzzled by the soup. "Is it not to your liking?" I asked, concerned. He inquired if the soup was made with the same recipe I inherited from my father. "Well, yes it is," I replied, now worried there might be something wrong with the flavor. The man then introduced himself. I apologize for the abruptness. I'm Richard Taylor. The name didn't ring a bell, and I was confused. "I used to share meals with your father back in the day. It's me, Richard," he clarified. It finally clicked. He was the head chef from the resort I had stayed at, the same one who fell ill abruptly. He had been my father's fellow apprentice, the one with whom my father had parted on bad terms. "I'm deeply sorry for my sudden illness when you visited us," he apologized. "How's your health now?" I asked. "I'm fine now, as you can see," Richard responded, blushing a bit as he ran his hand through his trimmed hair. "Did you come by chance?" "I heard it from the young proprietress," I replied. She had told me about the man who had placated a disgruntled customer the morning after the head chef had collapsed. She checked the guest book and informed me it was a certain Noah Jones. "So you're the son of that Jones," Richard said, "and you came all this way to thank me." That reminded me of how my father and Richard had parted ways over their differing cooking styles. When I asked Richard about it, he said, "That's true, but we respected each other's skills as chefs. It was just a matter of different directions." My father always aimed to complement alcohol, so he pursued flavors that matched well with drinks. Richard, on the other hand, not being a big drinker, sought after flavors that appealed to everyone. Though my father and Richard rarely met, they stayed in touch. "You know, I briefly met you at your father's funeral," Richard added. "Oh, I see." "My apologies for not remembering," I replied. "It's been 5 years already." "Yes, time flies," Richard said, looking off into the distance. I was curious about Richard's reaction when he tasted the soup earlier. "About the soup," he began. "It was delicious, but it felt different from your father's flavor." So I made the soup and offered it to Richard again. After he took a sip, he said, "It feels similar, but does it lack something?" "Well, how should I put it? It's a more refined taste." "Richard, weren't you usually served my father's soup after a heavy night of drinking?" "Yes, that's right," he replied. "Back in our apprentice dormitory, your father and I used to drink together a lot. I'm not a heavy drinker, so I'd get drunk quite quickly. Then your father would say, 'Here, have this as the last drink.' It was so delicious. Even when I tried to recreate it by brewing the broth my way, I couldn't. I asked your father if there was a secret ingredient, and he'd say, 'The secret ingredient is love, keeping it a mystery.' The secret was quite simple. My father's dishes were generally strong and flavorful to pair well with alcohol. However, he made his final course soup light. The method was straightforward, nothing special. He simply added 1 cup of hot water to 3 cups of regular soup stock to dilute it. After heavy drinking, that was just right and healthy, according to my father's philosophy. "I see," Richard said, taking a sip of the soup I'd made from scratch, thinned with hot water. "It seems I haven't had enough to drink tonight. Is it perhaps a bit bland for your taste?" "Yes," I admitted, and we both burst out laughing. We spent some time reminiscing about my old man. Toward the end, Richard got serious. "Sorry to ask, but did you lose customers after the express train stopped at the station?" "Well, yeah, I guess so." "Has it affected your business?" "It's been barely making ends meet recently." "Why don't you come work with me after I retire?" Richard asked. "After you?" "Richard, you mean at your hotel?" Richard explained that he's getting old and thinking about retiring soon. The staff he currently has are excellent chefs, but something is missing. It seems everyone's too obedient. They lack the spirit. We don't have anyone with the backbone your father had. I wonder if you'd be a good fit. I wasn't sure if I had as much spirit as my old man did. Plus, it wouldn't be fair to the chefs who'd been there from the start if I just walked in. I'm honored by your offer, but I can't give up on this place. It's my dad's legacy. I'm not ready to let go yet." When I said this, Richard seemed to understand and nodded several times. "You're right. I was too hasty. After all, you're the son of that great man." He left me an invitation to visit his kitchen if I ever changed my mind, along with a complimentary voucher for his hotel. About 3 months passed since Richard started visiting my diner. My business was on the verge of collapse. Maybe I should go check out Richard's hotel. I wasn't ready to close the doors of my diner just yet, but I knew I needed to do something if I wanted to move forward. "Mr. Jones, we've been expecting you." "Did I arrive a bit too early?" I asked, aiming to get there before the chefs got busy with dinner preparations. "I'll call the head chef for you. He should be free at this time. That's why you came early, right?" she said, smiling as she understood my intent. "The head chef is also eagerly waiting for you. Hey everyone, listen up. This is Noah Jones, the man I've been telling you about." As soon as he guided me to the kitchen, Richard introduced me to the other chefs. Everyone bowed their heads and said, "Nice to meet you, Richard." I'm still not sure I understand it. It just happens that some of our experienced staff decided to go independent recently. Look, they are all young, aren't they? So, I told them that a friend of mine might be able to lend a hand. That's you, Richard said. But I felt a little uncomfortable. After all, I hadn't given up on my dad's diner. That night, after a dip in the hot springs and returning to my room, the hotel's maid had set up my dinner. When asked what I'd like to drink, I ordered a glass of bourbon. Shortly thereafter, the bourbon was brought in. The one who brought it was the young proprietress named Catherine. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for having me. Please, have a drink. Thank you. I'm honored to have the young proprietress herself serving me. Oh, it's nothing. I've heard about your father from the head chef. Recently, Richard has been talking about your dad to everyone every chance he got. He told me that the person I am now is because of your father. It's odd. My dad used to tell me about Richard, whom he had a falling out with. He referred to him as a fellow apprentice. I continued, you know what they say, the better the friendship, the fiercer the fight. I mused while I poured myself another glass, and then another from the bottle that Catherine had handed me. Please, feel free to indulge tonight, she suggested. She was quite persuasive, and by the time I was fairly inebriated, Richard arrived. How about this as a second helping from your dad? A nice bowl of soup to finish off, he offered. I felt a strong urge from Catherine and Richard to become a cook at their hotel, but I couldn't bring myself to close the restaurant my father had left me. That night, I was alone in my bed, and I couldn't fall asleep. What part of this dish do you not like? It's old-fashioned, the food Dad cooked. It doesn't matter what you said, we're serving this to customers. I remembered arguing with my father about cooking. Those memories faded in and out in my drunken head. My restaurant was quiet for the days that followed until one day an unexpected customer arrived. It was Catherine. Oh, you startled me. I just decided to come. Did Richard suggest you come here? Yes, partly, but I also wanted to come, she replied. Just a moment, please, I said to Catherine, and pulled in the shop curtain that was hanging outside. Sorry, but we're closed for today. Because of me? Catherine asked, looking a bit apologetic. Since you're already here, and it's not like we're busy. I gestured around the empty restaurant with a resigned laugh. So things are really tough. Huh. I'm ashamed to admit it, I confessed. I heard rumors about a major blow to the next town ever since the express train started passing through, she mentioned. Anyway, let's forget about these depressing talks. Let's enjoy ourselves. Catherine was quite a drinker. She was the only daughter in her family that had been running a spa resort in the area for generations. Naturally, she became the young proprietress. She had learned to drink since she took over the role. I start working early in the morning, and I find myself looking forward to a drink after a long day. I'm the same, but in my case, I think I just inherited my father's love for alcohol, I replied. Just a few months earlier, Catherine and I had met only once or twice, but we were now talking like old friends. Come on, let's have another round. Another one? I asked, surprised. Yes, just one more. But my heart was already full. Dad, I'm sorry. I can't keep running this restaurant anymore. 6 months later, I closed the restaurant that my father had left me and took a job as the deputy chef at the spa resort where Catherine and Richard were. Thanks to Richard's efforts, the existing chefs warmly accepted me when I was appointed as deputy chef. The young proprietress, Catherine, had proposed a condition. Please live here in this resort and join us for a drink after work. This was exactly what I wished for. I had no reason to refuse. Noah, come on over here. Let's have a drink again tonight. Why not? Let's do it. When I entered the room where she was waiting, I saw Catherine happily pouring whiskey. Here, have a glass. I responded with a nod and took the shot glass in my hand. As Catherine poured for me, I thought to myself, I'm about to turn 40. It's not that I haven't had girlfriends in the past, but I've stayed single up to this age. My late parents were late to marry, and when my dad was 40, I was born. Now, as I'm about to turn the same age as my dad was when I was born, I'm here every night getting whiskey poured for me by Catherine. Maybe this is what they call fate. What do you mean? In response to Catherine's question, I said this. Will you accompany me for a nightcap? For the rest of our lives. For the rest of our lives. After a moment, Catherine smiled broadly and nodded vigorously. Catherine and I gazed at each other. It was a moment when our feelings connected. Thus, Catherine and I got married, with Richard, who retired, serving as a matchmaker. Working together, we strive to manage the hotel.
I'm Michelle, a 48-year-old housewife. I've been with my husband Stephen since college, and we got married 3 years after we both started working. We had our first daughter, Linda, right away, and then 2 years later, our son Matthew. There were tough times, like when I was distressed by my daughter's friendship problems or consumed with nursing my son, who was prone to illness. But now, those are all good memories. Our children have grown up and are now enjoying their college life living alone. Our marriage has lasted for over 20 years. My husband is bossy but has always been diligent in his work. However, he left all the housework and child rearing to me. Since my friends often grumble about similar things, I've never given much thought about it. This is just how husbands are. Our passion burned out long ago, but we have a sense of companionship as a couple who have been together for many years. Both the physical affection and the conversations have decreased, but I guess that's what happens with any long-term couple. I don't have any major complaints, but there's no excitement either. I do the housework, work part-time, and take care of my husband. I guess this routine will continue until one of us passes away. I thought my husband wanted that too, but it turns out he was betraying me. One weekend, my husband brought a young woman home. She introduced herself as Stephanie and seems to be his subordinate. Apparently, she's 26, about the same age as our daughter. As he embraced her, my husband said something shocking. I'm marrying her. I want a divorce. Excuse me? It was like a bolt out of the blue. Matthew has turned 20, so our role as parents is done. I want to spend the rest of my life with the person I truly love. Hold on a minute, I can't digest all of this. The woman, my husband's subordinate, sneered at my confusion. Dar marrying me? She said. We want you to leave. Dar? What does that mean? I don't understand. Oh, wait, she means darling. While I was reeling, the two of them began to emphatically talk about their love and why they should be together. It's wonderful to love someone, they said. I might have agreed if it were someone else's story. She's my junior at work, and she's been healing my tired body and soul from work and home life. My husband said this without any hesitation. And he always helps me with my mistakes, treats me to delicious meals. Look, he even bought me this bag. Has he ever bought you something like this? The woman flaunted a bag that even I, not keen on brands, recognized as being from a high-end store. Of course, I've never been given such a gift. In fact, he hasn't even celebrated my birthday for the past few years. You're clearly just in it for the money, I said, a fit of laughter denying their so-called pure love. Men find wealth charming too, don't they? The reason why you old hacks get dumped is because you don't understand that. I understand that. I've always known that, Stephanie retorted. I'm not planning on lying and saying I don't need money. I appreciate my husband, who works hard every day too. That's enough, my husband said, seemingly irritated. If I'm going to spend the same money, I'd rather spend it on a young, cute girl who knows how to please a man. You're past your sell-by date. Your time is up. We want you to leave. The young woman clung to my husband and looked down on me. My world came crashing down, and all I could do was stare back at them with despair. I could not utter a word. The following week was hell. My husband started going to this woman's house with no reservations, and he barely spent time at home anymore. On the other hand, the woman kept barging into our house every day, berating me. "Are you still here? Hurry up and get a divorce. How pathetic to cling on to a man who doesn't love you. You're so embarrassing, old lady. Why do I have to put up with this woman's verbal abuse? What did I do to deserve this? Is being an older woman a crime?" I was angry, but I had planned to spend my life with my husband till the end, so it took time to accept the reality. Besides, I was paralyzed at the thought of the impact this could have on my children's future, as they would end up with a single parent. It was my children who finally gave me the push I needed. "Mom, why didn't you talk to us about this before?" My daughter and son, who were living on their own, came home for the weekend. Even though I hadn't told them anything, they seemed to know the situation. "Linda, Matthew, why?" Dad reached out to us. He said your mom is jealous of a younger woman and is reluctant to get a divorce. "Matthew, you understand how I feel, don't you?" My son said, looking disgusted as he spat out my husband's selfish argument. "That's terrible, dragging my son into this," I thought. "Oh, that's so gross. The mistress is 26, right? She's about my age. That totally sucks." My daughter made a face, seemingly utterly disgusted, and then she forcefully slapped my shoulder. "Mom, you should just get a divorce. But what if it affects your job prospects or future marriages? If someone's going to judge me based on that, I wouldn't want them in my life anyway," my daughter said, sticking out her tongue and making a goofy face. In an unusually serious tone, my son looked into my eyes. "Hey Mom, have you ever considered thinking about yourself more than us? If you divorced Dad, would there be any issues? Any issues with the house? I would only have to take care of myself. Or money. If I can get him to pay for the kids' college tuition, I can survive on my part-time job and the rent income from the apartment I inherited from my father. If I don't have to take care of my husband, I can work more hours. Without him, I can even start learning, right? I won't be scolded for going to lunch with my friends on weekends. Cheering for an idol on TV without being told it's embarrassing to fawn over young men would be nice. In the first place, he's the only one who's infatuated with a younger woman. If I divorce him, I'll be free of all these annoyances, right? Isn't that the best? I won't have any problems even if I get a divorce," I declared out loud. The moment I said that, I felt as if everything in front of me had suddenly become brighter. Exactly. In fact, the one who's going to have issues marrying a selfish man like Dad is his mistress, right? "Yes, exactly," my daughter strongly agreed. "Mom, we appreciate how much you care about us, but I'd rather see you happy. I can get through anything if you're healthy. My son and daughter are my strong support group. You're only 48. That's not even halfway through your life. It's a waste to dedicate the rest of it to that crappy father. We'll try our best to become independent. You should live your life for yourself, Mom." Linda, Matthew, I couldn't hold back my tears. "Thank you. I'm so lucky to have you both as my children. That's because you raised us with so much love, Mom." Despite feeling exhausted from being betrayed by the husband I trusted, my children's words brought comfort to my heart. I haven't wasted my life. I haven't until now, and I won't in the future. I won't hesitate anymore. I will live the rest of my life for myself. Once I completely got over my feelings for my husband, I acted swiftly to divorce. While their affair is still going on, there's a risk that their relationship could end before our divorce is finalized, which could complicate the divorce proceedings. I hired a lawyer who specializes in divorce cases and prepared to move out. Once everything was ready, I informed my husband of my intention to divorce and arranged a meeting. We settled all matters such as the kids' college expenses, asset division, and alimony within reasonable bounds. Honestly, I wanted to leave him penniless, but making the divorce process smooth was the top priority. Besides, it was clear to see that the cheating pair was on a path to disaster. Doing anything unnecessary could prolong the divorce process, and I didn't want to poke the hornet's nest. My ex-husband paid me a lump sum, as if he was disposing of an expired woman like one would pay for a garbage disposal. The mistress was reluctant at first as his fortune dwindled, but for some reason that I can't fathom, she seemed to reconsider him as a generous spender. I nearly burst out laughing at their farcical display, but I held it in. Just a little more patience. A man who knows nothing but pride and a woman who's after nothing but money. They have no idea how much they're going to struggle from here. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. over there. Our last joint effort as a couple was submitting our divorce papers to the city hall. Behind us in the line at the counter was that mistress, as if to rub it in our faces. After we completed our divorce filing, she boldly asked for a marriage license at the counter. The city hall employee looked astonished, comparing us three, then hesitantly handed over the papers to the woman. There she was, hugging the papers as if she'd won a trophy. I felt like it was none of my business, but I needed to confirm with the woman. Are you sure you're okay with that guy? What sour grapes? You're the one who wanted a divorce. Hurry up and get it done, lady. All right. If this young girl with a future is being deceived by this old man, it's truly a pity, but it looks like I can pass on the joker without any qualms. Leaving the two behind who had begun to fill out the marriage registration form in a cuddle, I left the city hall. The sky was clear and blue. I wonder if those two are also looking at the same scenery. And so, I started a new chapter in my life. After the divorce, I moved into one of the apartments that I owned. Of course, there's no rent. It's in my hometown, so there are plenty of my old classmates around, and I'm never short of people to talk to. It's also convenient for transportation, so my daughter and son come to visit on weekends. I couldn't thank my parents enough for leaving me such a place. The only worry was quitting my part-time job, where I had worked for many years, but I was lucky that it was a chain store. The manager pulled some strings and got me hired at a store near my new place under the same conditions. It was all worth it for having worked so diligently for so long. The only time I felt a little lonely was the first month when I cooked too much food. Now, I'm enjoying the joy of living alone and cooking just for myself every day. About half a year into these days, I got a call from an unknown number. I inadvertently answered it and heard a woman shrieking in a piercing voice without even introducing herself. Hey lady, everyone in the company and my fiancé's relatives are all saying they want to attend our wedding. It's your fault, isn't it? That's an irritating way of speaking. Unforgettable, my ex-husband's mistress, blaming others for the seeds she herself has sown. It's just too much. Not the accusations. All I did was relay the fact that my husband is divorcing me to be with a young, cute colleague at work. That's what you were saying, wasn't it? And I only spoke the truth and did farewell to the people who had been good to me. But it's really strange that everyone didn't show up. My ex-husband's family and coworkers are all serious people. They don't accept dishonest people like the both of you. We were just here seeking true love. Oh really? How about explaining to everyone what true love is then? I suppose it's because the people around my husband are quite sensible, and they have such a strong rejection of the two adulterers. But I was happy to know that the good marital relationship I had built over the past 20 years was affirmed. That woman made a lot of noise, but in the end, the wedding was postponed. It wasn't the old reason from the people around her that influenced it, but the fact that she was pregnant. When the child was born, she went out of her way to contact me, demanding that my children and I send a baby gift. My ex-husband, on the other hand, seemed to have said something silly to the kids, like, "Be nice to your new sibling." Of course, there was no way we could accept that, but my daughters made complex faces at the news of their half-brother, who was more than 20 years younger. I felt bad too, but it's not the child's fault for being born. So, I took her call with an adult attitude, but she just kept complaining. No gifts for the baby from Dar's relatives. Why don't you realize that people are keeping their distance? There's no way that's true. If they see me, they should know that the new wife is lovely. We need to make our debut at a wedding ceremony. Wait, you still want to have a wedding? How incorrigible. Of course, I made a promise with him. I'm going to wear a white dress at the wedding, and we'll go to Hawaii for our honeymoon. We'll take photos in the wedding dress with a blue sea in the background. You're jealous, right? What a cheerful woman. That's a lovely dream, but do you know how much it will cost? It costs about $200 million to raise a child. She seemed a bit flustered but then busted out, "But it's okay because he earns a lot. He may be earning now, but your husband will retire when your child is still in middle school. After that, even if he's rehired, his income will drop significantly, and his pension is still far off." Oh, I wonder if she felt something there. Even though his salary might be higher than your friend's husband's, if you consider his age, he's just average. In fact, he's already earned most of his lifetime income. She seemed stunned over the phone. She really made a child without thinking. Just as I thought, but it's too foolish to be astounded. He'll be hitting 60 in just over 10 years. His blood pressure is high too, which is a concern for his health. What? Oh, you didn't know that. Have you been properly looking at his medical examination results? He should have had issues every year. She seemed to be at a loss for words. My ex-husband hates hospitals, so I had a hard time getting him to go for re-examinations. Without his nagging ex-wife, he's probably ignoring his health checks and eating and drinking as he pleases. I further hammered the reality home to her, who had fallen silent. Do you think he'll be able to work healthily until retirement? But don't worry, you're young. You can still work for over 30 years. By the way, are you on maternity leave right now? Well, I asked her sarcastically, knowing she wouldn't be able to return to her job after her maternity leave. The news of their infidelity and illicit marriage had reached the higher-ups in their company. They both faced disciplinary actions for violating compliance policies, extinguishing any chance she had to resume her job after maternity leave. A friend who was my ex-husband's colleague had duly reported this to me. She might have had a chance of redemption if she had realized the harsh scrutiny she was under when nobody wanted to attend their wedding, but it seemed she had finally understood the gravity of her situation. Good luck. He can't do any household chores or take care of the baby. But if your love is real, you can overcome anything. I really admire you. I had a lunch date with my friends, so I ended the call without listening to her response. She was probably shocked by the dismal reality of her age gap marriage and the infidelity that she blindly rushed into. I'd love to see the look on her face up close and laugh, saying, "That's what you deserve," but I'll pass on that. Spending time with my beloved friends is more worthwhile than belittling a hated adversary. Fast forward a year. Hey, you're Michelle, right? As I was leaving my apartment, a man called out to me. It was my ex-husband. This was the first time I had seen him since our divorce. He seemed to have tried to reach out to our kids in various ways, asking them to love their newborn brother and to get along as a family. Though I never disclosed my post-divorce residence, he knew I inherited my parents' apartment and probably deduced that I lived there. "Long time no see," my ex-husband smirked, raising the corners of his mouth. I tried to recall if he had always had such a creepy smile in the first place. I hadn't even seen his smile in recent years. I thought various emotions would well up upon seeing his face, but surprisingly, I handled it calmly. "What do you want?" gold, aren't you? We were together for 20 years. It was you who wrecked the relationship." Ignoring my sour expression, my ex-husband started rattling off complaints about his new married life. In short, his new wife is nagging him to stop wasting money, take care of the baby, wash the dishes, and do the laundry. He should also start saving money because he's almost retiring. He should play with his kid because he's a father. He should be changing diapers and caring for their son more. My ex-husband gripes as if she's saying something unreasonable, but her claims are generally accepted as a norm in society. She's finally realized this unhealthy, lazy man who doesn't help with housework or child rearing will be nothing but a burden when he retires. In this age, when it's normal for fathers to help with housework and child rearing, she must be shocked to see her friends' husbands actively doing housework. The problem is the man in front of her, who even after 2 years, can't seem to understand his position. When you get married, women change. It's scary, but you never said things like, "Do the housework," or "help with the kids," did you? That's right. Times were different then, and I too thought that was the norm. That's why I realized the only one who really loved me was you. Excuse me. Taken aback by my ex-husband's absurd statement, I blinked in surprise. I wonder what kind of misconception this foolish face has. He scratches his nose with an embarrassed run and starts to speak. "It must be lonely being single at your age. You're even more beautiful than you were when we were married. I thought maybe you were waiting for me to come back. Sure, you're a little old, but you are the best because you always went along with me without complaining. I'm willing to forget it, so you should be honest too. Excuse me, you still love me, don't you? What the hell are you talking about?" I let out a strange scream and nearly fell over. "What?" My ex-husband jerked at my shriek and froze. I thought that my resentment and anger towards my ex-husband had softened due to the enjoyable days after the divorce, but the anger welled up again at his outrageous attitude. "What kind of nonsense are you talking about in broad daylight? What exactly would I gain by getting back together with a man like you who has no redeeming qualities? Huh?" My ex-husband stammered. "If I've become more beautiful, it's probably because I'm stress-free now that I'm separated from you. I'm grateful to your mistress. Thanks to her, I was able to divorce you, and I'm having a great time. I'm really glad I didn't have to live a life changing your diapers." "No way." My ex-husband's face turned pale at my firm rebellion, probably seeing it for the first time. "That's right. Even when he declared divorce, I didn't tell him my true feelings, and even after we were separated, I just went with everything without complaint. Could you move aside? I'm going on a date now." A date? My ex-husband's voice squeaked like something out of a comic book. "An old lady like you? That's right. You're definitely being tricked. Wake up." "That's fine. If I'm spending money, I'd rather it be on a young and handsome guy. You're past your expiration date." "What?" "I'm just returning the words you once said to me, and if I had one more thing, you're just a large piece of trash that can be recycled." He opened and closed his mouth like a fish, but it seemed like he couldn't find any more words to say. "Well, I have someone waiting for me. Let's both forget about each other and find happiness. Goodbye." Michelle." He called my name in a pleading tone, but I didn't even bother to turn around. I quickly walked away. At this rate, it won't be long before he's a 2-time divorcee. Someone once said that becoming happy is the best form of revenge, and I really believed that. After all, it seems like my brisk departure left him in complete shock. "Mom." When I reached the meeting place, my daughter was waving her hand and approaching me. She was my date for today. "Sorry I'm late. Your dad showed up." Are you okay?" I'm fine. I finally got to say everything I wanted to say, and I feel so refreshed. But right now, it's all about the concert. I worked my part-time job really hard for this day. "Hey, Mom, shall we go?" "Yes. Today is the concert of a male singer I've always loved, and it's my second time attending. I've even become capable of securing tickets without my daughter's help. I've picked up other hobbies, but following the singer is my top pleasure right now. I attend his musicals with friends, play his new songs over and over in my car, and even my son sends me updates about his performances on TV shows. It's not just the freedom to chase after what I love that makes me happy, but the fact that everyone is supporting my passion. I might be laughed at for being an older fan, but it's fine. I'm not bothering anyone. After all, this is my life. I had completely forgotten how fun it can be to live for myself, cooking for my family, planning outings for the kids, and maintaining a comfortable home for my husband brought their own satisfaction. I found my value in those things, and the thought of losing all my past and my worth with divorce was terrifying. But it wasn't like that at all. My children cherish me, and the relationships and the work that I've built up over the years are still very much alive. Rather than clinging to the past, it's much more enjoyable to give it your all and start a new life. Stepping into the unknown requires courage, but once you get started, there are many exciting new encounters. I'm going to enjoy living my life to the fullest.
You seem to be with a pretty poor-looking man, huh? He's nothing like my husband. Anger, sadness, and frustration mixed in my heart at these words. And I couldn't help but look down. That was my former best friend, who had stolen my fiancé and married him. After 10 long years, I hadn't expected to run into her. Especially since I had moved away after getting married. We were just having a meal at a diner in tracksuits when she appeared. My husband has climbed his way up to being the head of the medical department thanks to me. He makes good money, so buying brand stuff is easy for us. She flaunted her branded bags and accessories, looking down on us with disdain. I remembered the time when we were still friends. She wasn't like this. That version of her no longer existed. I just wanted her to leave us alone. Please, don't disturb our family time. While I remained silent, it was my husband who spoke up. The husband of my best friend, who was also my former fiancé, showed up. My husband called out and greeted him. Suddenly, my former fiancé began to tremble. And then, the true identity of my husband was revealed, which changed my best friend's attitude completely. My name is Megan, 34 years old. I am a housewife living with my husband Sean, who is 6 years older than me, and our 7-year-old daughter Ashley. Sean often has to travel due to his responsible position. I'm sorry for always leaving Ashley to you, he would say with a sense of guilt, but it hardly felt like a burden to me. Ashley, despite her young age, was becoming quite reliable. She would come home from school, immediately start on her homework, finish it smoothly, and then play games, read comics, or watch TV. At night, she would help me prepare dinner, growing up to be a very kind child. "Leave mommy to me, Daddy," she would say proudly, puffing out her chest. Seeing her like that, both Sean and I couldn't help but smile. We usually spend time at home when it's just Ashley and me. But when Sean is back, we often go out as a family of 3. But it's not to shopping malls or amusement parks. Sean, due to his job, made it a routine to work out. Every night, he would train for about 30 minutes to an hour. And he wouldn't skip even when he was at a hotel during his business trips. I did my training properly today too. He would report via message when he wasn't home. On days off, when we had the morning free, the 3 of us would often go out jogging. Initially, Ashley and I weren't used to exercise, so it was more like walking than jogging. But gradually we started to run more. Now, we can not only keep up with Sean leading ahead but also enjoy the scenery around us. In the spring, we run alongside the river blooming with flowers. In the summer, we see people barbecuing by the river. In the fall, it's the autumn leaves, and in winter, we run past trees that have shed their leaves and look forlorn. We take breaks, sitting on benches, drinking, and chatting, which I really enjoy. Initially, we went in our regular clothes. But now we have bought matching tracksuits that we change into before heading out. Our neighbors, seeing our tracksuits in different colors, would say with a smile, "You all look so close." Sean and I blushed and gave a slight smile, while Ashley nodded energetically. Now, I lead a healthy and fulfilling life. But it wasn't without its share of pain and struggle to get here. It all goes back 10 years. Back then, I had a fiancé named Brian, who was 2 years older than me. We were childhood friends and our families were close. We would visit each other's homes and even plan trips together during long vacations. However, I couldn't leave home for more than a night or two because I had a very weak constitution. Even leading a normal daily life could suddenly result in a fever, or I'd be bedridden with a headache. At school, I couldn't participate much in physical education, and would end up watching from the bench set up on the field while others exercised. Considering my health, I also couldn't travel much, because I couldn't visit crowded places or walk for a long time. "I'll become a doctor for you, Megan. That way, I can always be by your side and take care of you immediately if you get sick." It might have been around middle school when Brian shared this dream with me. He looked at me with such determination, and I almost teared up. Whenever we went out, I was always worried about getting sick or causing trouble for others. It felt like he was trying to sweep away those worries, which made me happy. As a childhood friend and as a boyfriend, he had always supported me. I felt blessed by the people around me, not only my parents but also Brian's family. And then, in high school, I met a classmate named Christina. We started talking because we sat next to each other at the entrance ceremony, and became closer as we spent lunchtimes and after-school walks together. She became someone I could call a best friend. Christina was very kind and helped me in many ways after I told her about my weak health. If I missed classes, she would show me her notes, teach me the assignments, and even accompany me to the nurse's office when I suddenly fell ill at school. Although we were in different classes during the second and third years, we remained close. During high school, even if I got sick, I would recover in a day, and my condition was more stable than before. However, after graduation, my health declined significantly. I was in and out of the hospital, unable to study or work. Despite being busy with university, Christina often visited me. She had become more stylish with dyed hair and makeup but was still the same kind Christina inside. She would show me photos of famous spots and cute cafes she had visited with her college friends, saying, "When you're discharged, I'd love to go there with you, Megan." Those words gave me strength. Brian attended medical school. Despite his busy schedule with studies and internships, he still found time to keep in touch and visit me. I was deeply touched by the kindness of those around me, filled with a sense of happiness. I wonder when that all began to change. It might have been when I was 22 years old. A pivotal moment when I moved to a specialist hospital to focus on my treatment. It was around that time that I met Sean. He became my attending physician, while I was often confined to my hospital room. Brian and Christina began a secret relationship. Their visits to see me overlapped, and they became acquainted and started talking more. At that time, I hadn't realized it. I didn't see the predatory look in Christina's eyes as she gazed at Brian. I only learned of their affair 2 years later when I turned 24. I had hoped that once my condition stabilized, thanks to the treatment, I could go out on dates with Brian or hang out with Christina. Sorry, let's break up. He suddenly told me this. To my dismay, Christina was present beside him, giving me a bad feeling. Why? I could barely whisper, shocked. Without looking me in the eye, Brian spoke disdainfully. Being a doctor, having a wife as frail as you, Megan, wouldn't look good socially, right? I can't stand having someone who isn't physically robust. Stunned, I stared at him with unfocused eyes. Christina, caught in my peripheral vision, was covering her mouth with her hand, barely suppressing her laughter. Anyway, you are nothing but a burden to me now. I'm cutting ties. Oh, me too. Now that I think about it, I've always found you bothersome since high school. With that, the two of them, arm in arm, walked away from me. I realized that Brian had been influenced by Christina's selfish and pretentious ways as their relationship developed. Since our families were close, the news of our breakup quickly reached our parents. Brian's parents apologized to me with pained expressions and informed me about his situation that I hadn't known. He was a fledgling doctor, deeply dissatisfied with his current situation. Previously humble and studious, he had lost his motivation under Christina's influence and started taking the easier path. The shock of their betrayal worsened my already fragile health. Seeing my condition, my parents suggested moving to another city with a specialist hospital. Staying here, you'll keep being reminded of Brian and Christina, which would be painful. If your heart remains heavy, it will surely affect your body too. I sincerely took their advice, and my entire family moved. Dr. Sean Hansen, my new physician, treated me with great care, having built a rapport akin to a confidant. He also supported my emotional recovery after being harshly dumped by Brian. Thanks to his dedicated treatment, I mentally recovered, and my physical health gradually returned. On days I couldn't even get out of bed, Dr. Hansen, who had been closely monitoring my progress, would say, "Megan, you are truly remarkable. You're very strong to have recovered this much without letting the disease defeat you." It was with great reverence that he admired me for having battled my illness throughout my 20s. Similarly, I respected and trusted him for his consistently kind and attentive care. Over time, as we spent more hours together, these feelings transformed into love, and we started dating. When I was 27, a turning point in Sean's career came, and we decided to get married. After being discharged, I began a new life with him. Many stores, supermarkets, various types of houses lining the streets. Weeds growing by the roadside interspersed with bright flowers. Those ordinary scenes that dazzled me, and for a while after we started our new life, I was constantly moved by the smallest things. Sean never ridiculed this. He always watched over me with a kind face. From now on, let's go to various places and see different scenes together. We'll go flower viewing, to the beach, and even try autumn leaf hunting. Oh, but without overdoing it, of course. Now fully healthy, I could go to all the places Sean had mentioned. We'd take packed lunches to parks filled with flowers, and in the summer, even if we didn't swim, we'd dip our feet in the sea. In autumn, we'd enjoy the fall foliage, and when it snowed in winter, we'd make palm-sized snowmen. I took photos often, so all these memories are preserved as images. Sometimes I look back at them, and the feelings from those times resurface. allowing me to immerse myself in happiness. Having lost all my physical strength due to the long hospital stays, I started jogging with Sean to regain it, and now our daughter joins us too. One day, as usual, the three of us were running, when we decided to stop at a diner around lunchtime. "Megan? Is that you? It's been a while." There, quite by chance, I ran into Christina again. Bitter memories surfaced, and I almost showed it on my face, but I held back because of the child. "I moved to this town with Brian. But anyway." She paused, then stared at us up and down as if sizing us up. When her gaze landed on Sean in his tracksuit, she burst out laughing. "Looking poor, huh? And you got married despite being Megan? Oh, did you two poor people just hit it off?" Her rude remarks kept coming. The girl I knew from high school was gone. She was completely a different person now. I almost admired how she could pretend for 3 years. Christina had a designer bag branded with logos, and wore several expensive earrings and rings. Noticing my gaze, she proudly held up her bag in front of her face. "Brian has climbed his way up to being the head of the medical department thanks to me. He makes good money, so buying brand stuff is easy for us. That's a big difference from that poor-looking man over there." Anger, sadness, and frustration mixed inside me, and I couldn't help but bow my head. Ashley, sitting next to me, squeezed my arm worriedly. I just wanted them to go away. "Please, don't disturb our happy family time." As I remained silent, it was Sean who spoke up. "That Brian you mentioned, is that Mr. Anderson recently transferred to this area, right?" Yes." "Why do you ask?" Christina seemed startled, perhaps not expecting Sean to initiate the conversation. Then Brian appeared. He must have been to the restroom and had just returned. He looked confused, glancing back and forth between Sean and me. "I am a private practitioner, Sean Hansen." Hearing that name, Brian started shaking violently. In fact, Sean is a well-known and excellent doctor in the medical community. He had published a paper on my case, which received high praise. Of course, with my consent. Though he was on a fast track to a brilliant career, he chose to abandon that path to engage more directly with his patients, becoming a general practitioner in this town. Still, he is sometimes called to the university hospital. Naturally, Brian knew of him, which is why he trembled upon hearing his name. "Oh, come on, you should have said so earlier. I didn't know you were such a prominent person." Once Christina knew about Sean's profession, she completely changed her attitude. In the end, she judges people only by their status and what they wear, not caring to know who they truly are. She had forgotten how she had mocked us for looking poor because we were in tracksuits. And I wanted to call her out on her quick change of heart. "Let's leave this place." Feeling uncomfortable around Christina, I spoke out. Sean seemed to understand my feelings and nodded silently. "Oh no, are you leaving already?" "I still haven't talked enough." Ignoring Christina's grating, cutesy tone, we left the place. Once home, I vented my feelings to Sean. I waited until Ashley was asleep to avoid causing her any anxiety. I thought I was over those two. But being ridiculed like that brings up unforgivable feelings. I don't want anything to do with them anymore. As I spoke, trying to hold back tears and shaking, Sean gently placed his hand on my shoulder. "It's okay. I won't let you go through any more unpleasantness, just leave it to me." A few days later, a call from Christina appeared on my smartphone. I grimaced at her name but reluctantly answered. What's the meaning of this? Brian has been demoted and even put under house arrest. Her shrill voice echoed, and I instinctively covered my ears. Clearly flustered and panicking, Christina kept mumbling for an explanation. Come to Sean's hospital. With that firm reply, I immediately hung up. For Christina, the only clue to what happened to Brian was through Sean and me. She would surely come. And my prediction was correct. Brian was with Christina, and the atmosphere between them was tense and irritable. Sean, usually amiable, led them seriously into the reception room. Christina and Brian sat opposite to us, with Christina visibly sulking and plopping down noisily, crossing her legs. Megan, you must have instigated something, right? You're upset because I took Brian from you. Even now, she could still take such a condescending attitude. Why would you think I had anything to do with it? I questioned one of Brian's subordinates. There was an internal complaint. And he was demoted because of it, and your husband was involved. Using personal reasons to demote me is cowardly. Christina and Brian were accusing me together. But they were misunderstanding something. Just because I couldn't forgive them didn't mean I could cause such a big issue. That's not true. Sean quietly stated his case, and like hitting pause, they both stopped in their tracks. Brian knew better than to argue against Sean, a far superior doctor. You've had numerous issues with your behavior before, haven't you? I won't let you forget that. As Sean pointed this out calmly, Brian suddenly looked away. His mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. Christina, seemingly puzzled by what was being said, turned to Brian and grabbed his arm. In fact, Sean was well connected, and many younger doctors had consulted him about Brian. Brian had been shirking his responsibilities onto those below him, displaying arrogance and misusing his position as chief to do as he pleased. Even if we say it, they hardly believe us. But if it comes from you, Mr. Hansen, everyone will believe. All right, I understand. I'll discuss it with his boss myself. Following such exchanges, Sean reported to Brian's boss everything the young doctors had said. Initially, the boss was skeptical as Brian had managed to appear competent to him. It seemed Brian's pretentious nature, picked up from Christina, wasn't easy to shake. However, an internal investigation revealed the truth of Brian's misconduct, leading to his demotion, which was not due just to my intervention. Originally, a chief's role is not to wield power as he pleases, but to guide and educate the juniors. Brian clenched his fists in his lap as he listened to Sean, unable to utter a sound. The actions you took were the exact opposite of what should have been done. You have caused much distress to many young doctors. So this punishment is only natural. Brian slumped his shoulders. Whether Sean's words had prompted any real reflection was unclear. But he no longer had any rebuttals. Sean then turned his attention to Christina. She stiffened, perhaps anticipating what was coming next. She widened her eyes upon seeing the photos laid out on the table. Photos that showed her involved with several of Brian's subordinates. You were gallivanting around using the title of a doctor's wife, weren't you? What? What is this all about? Driven by anger, Brian suddenly raised his head and grabbed Christina's shoulder. She shifted her gaze to the side, avoiding eye contact. Moreover, you've been complaining about him not advancing in his career. The complaints must have ceased when he was promoted to head of the department. But now with the demotion, it was back to square one. The photos on the table mostly showed Christina entering hotels with other men, clearly involved, but among them was a single shot of her laughing in a cafe. perhaps continuing to speak ill of Brian. Damn it. Having a wife like you, so flippant, is embarrassing. What? I'm not interested in someone who's fallen off the career track anymore. What? Divorce then, divorce. Forgetting our presence, the two began a nasty argument. Watching them blankly, I wondered why I had ever been concerned about them. They were merely using each other for their selfish needs. There was no real trust between them. So their relationship was doomed to fail regardless of the demotion. Sean pulled them apart and ejected them from the hospital. They continued their loud argument all the way out. Eventually, Christina and Brian divorced. Both struggled with debts and legal challenges from their actions. Brian faced claims from the doctors he had mistreated. And Christina was sued for compensation for expensive bags and accessories by the wives of the men she had been involved with. After deleting all their contacts, I finally felt truly free from them. As I enjoyed jogging with my family on weekends, I cherished our life and health together even more.
Call me Diana. When I was 9, life hit the fan. No, I'm not using fancy words here, just telling it straight. It was me, my little sister Lizzie, who was 2, Mom, and the man I'd called Dad up until that world-flipping day. See, Dad had this DNA test done out of nowhere, really, and boom. Our family wasn't a family in the way we thought. Dad walked in, papers in hand, face all kinds of twisted up with, I don't know, anger, shock, sadness. Mom first went all pale, eyes wide, then she tried to shrug it off. But who was she kidding? When she saw Dad wasn't buying her act, she crumbled like a house of cards, tears and all, spilling the beans about not knowing who my real dad was and about still being in the picture with Lizzie's dad. That's how the domino fell. Dad split from Mom, but he didn't slam the door on us. He wasn't heartless. Kept sending money our way because in his heart, he still saw us as his kids, I guess. Love's weird like that. Mom didn't waste any time, though, married Lizzie's dad George quick as you like. Lizzie became the apple of his eye the second the ink dried on their marriage certificate. And he made it official by adopting her and cutting me out like last night's pizza. For me, it was like I became a ghost in my own home, invisible. Our house, it was less of a home and more of a crash pad for me. Mom was all about her new life with stepdad and Lizzie. They were like the picture-perfect 3, and there was me, just sort of there. I tried to be the good big sister, but she was being raised like she was an only child, princess costumes, bedtime stories, all smiles. Me, I was lucky if I got a good night hollered in my general direction. The dinner table was like a minefield. I'd sit quietly, trying to make myself smaller while they chatted about their days, about everything and nothing. I just pick up my food, not if someone accidentally made contact. Are you going to eat that? Stepdad would grunt, eyeing my chicken like he hadn't been fed in weeks. No, you can have it. I'd mumble, sliding my plate over. Hey, watch it, you're making a mess. He'd growl as a pea rolled off the table. Mom was no better. If I tried to talk to her about school or friends, she'd give me that nod-smile combo that adults do when they're not listening. Sure, honey, she'd say without missing a beat, in her phone scroll. The bell rang, cutting through the chatter of the hallway, signaling the end of the day. I gripped my backpack tighter, shuffling out with the rest, everyone pushing to be first to freedom. That's when I saw him, leaned up against the old metal fencing by the school gates, my dad. Dad, I said, peering close as if my eyes were playing tricks. Diana, he grunted, a curt nod in place of a smile. I stopped a few feet away, wary. What are you doing here? He got something to tell you. He ran a rough hand through his hair, which seemed more unruly than I remembered. "Can we go somewhere? Talk?" Glancing around, wondering if any of my friends were witnessing this reunion, I nodded towards my usual hangout. "There's a diner around the corner." The walk was silent, the clunk of his boots on pavement outpacing any attempt at small talk. The diner wasn't much, but it was a slice of familiarity compared to the man walking beside me. Once seated in a booth with peeling vinyl at a wobbly table, the waitress came over, eyeing Dad somehow suspiciously and me with concern. "The usual Diana?" she asked, her voice a welcome sound. I nodded. "Yeah, and whatever he'll have." Dad grunted again, not even picking up the menu. "Coffee, black," he said. I droned my fingers on the table, buying time. Eventually, I burst out, "You can't just show up like this." He didn't flinch. Didn't plan on it. "Thought you ought to know, though. I can't have kids, Diana." The words hummed there like heavy smoke. I stopped drumming my fingers. "So," he shifted uncomfortably. "Though you might want to know, be with your old man now that I know for sure you're the only one I'll have." My heart was doing strange flips. "Just like that, I drop everything and come with you." "It's not nothing, Diana," he said, his voice rising a touch. "Figured it meant something to you, especially Mom and George." Flashed in my mind along with the mound of unwashed laundry and the echoing silence every time I walked in the door. I sighed. "You got room for one more at your place?" "You bet," he said, shoulders relaxing. I got space. "And what would I do? Just hang out while you work?" The practical side of me needed details. "You go to school, I work. We'll figure the rest out." School. That was something I planned to finish no matter what. "Fine, but I'm finishing high school. No derailing that." He gave a small nod as if it was decided there and then. "Fine," I chewed my lip. Term was ending in a couple of months. It wouldn't be too bad. I convinced myself I'd make new friends or keep in touch with the old. Somehow, Mom and George, well, they have been more like roommates than family lately. Might not even notice I'm gone till rent's due. "Okay," I said, a strange lightness taking over. "Okay, let's do this." "But Dad, this can't be one of those fly-by-night schemes." "I'm serious." He met my eyes, and for a second, I saw something that might have passed for conviction. "I'm serious too, kiddo. Time to make things right." We left the diner with a plan forming. I was scared, but the idea of starting over with him, it felt like a real chance. As we walked back to the school to collect the rest of my things, I figured this might just be the new beginning I'd been craving. Dad and I live in a new city now. It's different, cold sometimes and loud, but it's home. Dad started his own business, something to do with tech and gadgets. It was just a bunch of computers at first, but it really picked up. People talk about him now like he's someone. I guess he is. I go to this local school. It's all right, I guess. Not much to say about it, except I'm there to get grades, and I'm doing good, real good. Got to, right? Dad set the bar up high with his success and all. I got to keep up, make him proud, that's the goal. And me. Dentistry is where it's a lot for me. Can't explain it. Really, just something about fixing people up, giving them a smile to be proud of. Sounds good, doesn't it? Dad's all for it. When I first told him, I thought he'd be like, "Dentistry, really?" But no, he was all, "If that's what you want, kiddo, then go for it." That's Dad for you, supportive as ever. My Mom and George, they're like a TV show I used to watch, but forgot how it goes. It's just static now, and I don't remember much about them. Doesn't matter though, we've got our own thing going on here. Another test. "How do you do it?" Dad's voice makes me jump as he comes into my room, his eyes all tired from work but smiling. Study, isn't it? Just hit the books and the answers stick, I say, shrugging like it's no big deal. Dad chuckles, the lines by his eyes crinkling up. You got your old man's brains, that's for sure. I roll my eyes. Yeah, just means I'll have to pick a fancy college for dentistry. They don't let any dummy in. Hey, you pick the college, I'll figure out the rest. He pats my head and then turns serious. Don't you worry about that. The thing is, I don't worry. Not about this. Dad's good for his word, always has been. There's this cool thing I've been doing, volunteering at a local dentist's office. Sounds boring, but trust me, it's not. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm there watching, learning, sometimes handing them tools like I know what I'm doing. It feels right, like I belong. I don't go out much, not a party person. I've got Emma and Zach at school, and that's plenty. Emma's all about basketball while Zach is into his music. They're cool, even if we don't hang out much outside of school. So when are you going to invite us over? Emma bumps my shoulder as we're walking out of class. I want to see if your dad's place looks as techy as you say. I shrug. You know we're pretty busy most of the time, but yeah, maybe. Zach is grinning, his headphones around his neck. Busy studying teeth, huh? If you ever need a guinea pig, he taps his front tooth. No way, I snort. I am not starting with your mouth. Days blend together, school and dentistry. It's like a rhythm, home, school, teeth stuff. But it's nice, predictable. I like it. I like knowing where I stand and where I'm headed. It's a good life. Dad and we're doing okay here. Business, school, future dentist stuff, it's all pieces of this new life. And I'm thinking, as I fall asleep with my dentistry book spread out around me, I'm really looking forward to what comes next. I'm 32 now. Year by year, the image of my dad in his prime fades a bit more. The edges blur like a photograph left too long in the sun. He's been gone for a few years, taken by a sickness that chewed him up from the inside. Damn, it made me mad, fists clenched, teeth gritted kind of mad. You see, I've been around medicine my whole life, with all this knowledge and not a penny spared on treatment. But still, the guy couldn't beat the odds. Life's a real piece of work, huh? It kicks you down and expects you to get up and say thank you. But I've always been a fighter. Dad used to say that, told me I got it from him. So after he passed, I let the pain fuel me and ran my own race. And now, here I am, a doctor at a dental clinic with my name on the door, inheriting everything Dad owned that did make things smoother. I won't lie, money talks in this world, and it's a lot louder when you're trying to keep a business afloat. I kicked ass to get to where I'm at, and Dad's inheritance just padded the fall a bit when things got rough. My clinic's the talk of town. People come in with all sorts of issues. A chipped tooth here, a cavity there. I see it all, fix what I can. But it's not just smiles I mend, oh no. People tell you things when they're sitting in that chair, looking up at the ceiling, trying not to think about the drill in their mouth. They talk about life, the raw, unpolished realness of it. I like that, makes every day different. Like this one guy, let's call him Joe. Burly fellow with tattoos all the way up his arms and a frown that looked permanent. Came in for a root canal, tough as nails, or so he thought. All right, Joe, open wide and let's take a look at the troublemaker, I'd say. My damn tooth's been killing me, he grunted, mouth already full of dental equipment. Can't chew my steak proper. Can't have that, I said, matching his straightforwardness. Let me fix you up right quick. By the end of the appointment, after some drilling and a whole lot of tough guy grunts, he was singing a different tune. Doc, you're a miracle worker, Joel mumbled through the gauze in his mouth. Go easy on the steak for a while, yeah. I told him, handing him a mirror to check out my handiwork. A job well done. If I may say so myself, that's the drill, my day in a nutshell. But it's not just teeth, it's the people behind them that keep the job interesting. So yeah, life goes on. I miss Dad every damn day, but I reckon he'd be proud. Proud that his little girl didn't just crumble. I look forward and push on. That's what you have to do, no use dwelling on the ifs. And the wise you deal with what's in front of you, one day, 1-to-1 heartache at a time. The sun was setting when I heard the knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, let alone Mom and Lizzie. Their sudden appearance felt like a gust of wind before a storm. "You got a nice place here," said Lizzie as she pushed past me like she owned the place. Her eyes were hungry, taking in every detail of my living room. "Hi, honey," Mom said, less bold but with a look that told me she had something on her mind. We were just in the neighborhood. I doubted that. They lived in another city. "What brings you here?" I asked, even though I had a nagging suspicion. "We need to talk, Diana," Lizzie cut in, plopping down on my sofa with no invitation. "I'm planning to go to college." I raised an eyebrow. "That's good to hear, Lizzie, but why do I feel like there's a but coming up?" She didn't hesitate. "But I need money, sis. I want to get into college, do something with my life." That struck a chord. I used to be in those shoes, staring up a mountain that felt impossible to climb. "Look, I want to help," I said, "but money isn't something you should take lightly." Mom chimed in, "Your sister's trying to do something with her life. You could make it easier for her." I felt the walls closing in. This felt wrong, just handing over cash without knowing if it would actually go to pay for college. But then again, this was family. "How much do you need?" I asked, already regretting the question. Lizzie's grimace turned into a grin. "Not much. 25 grand should cover the first couple years." I nearly choked. 25,000. That's a lot of money, Lizzie. "Don't act like it's a big deal for you." She snapped back. "You got it." That stung. Just because I had made something of myself didn't mean I had money to throw around. But looking at Lizzie, I saw the shadows of my own past, uncertain, scared. I sighed. "I'll give you the money, but on one condition. I will send it directly to the college when you enroll." Lizzie squirmed. "I haven't picked a place yet. I just need the money." "I'll handle the rest," her eyes dodging mine. The air felt heavy, like right before a storm breaks. "You don't trust me," her voice rose. "It's not about trust," I countered, but even as I said it, I knew it was. "I just want to make sure it's used right, Lizzie." There was a cold silence until Mom chimed in, tired of the back and forth. "We're not here to scam you." I took a breath, feeling cornered. Okay. I went to my desk, logged into my account, and did the transfer there. $25,000 for school. Lizzie's eyes lit up with a mix of victory and guilt. "Thanks, I won't forget this." But it was Mom's quick, greedy smile that stayed with me long after they left. I sat there, feeling a blend of worry and disappointment, hoping I hadn't just made a huge mistake. For months, I'd been on the phone with Mom and my sister back in our hometown. It felt good to help them out, sending a few $100 when I could. But when October rolled in, something in my gut told me to check up on Sis and her college situation. One afternoon, I called her, my voice casual as I asked about her classes. But like a slippery fish, she wriggled out of the topic, and before I could press on, she hung up. I frowned at my phone, a suspicious gnawing in my mind. Next thing, I'm stalking her social media like some sort of detective. There she was, all smiles, decked out in threads that screamed money, but not a single selfie in her college gear. Enough was enough. I hit the dial on Kara's number, my old buddy from the block. Kara, it's me, Diana. What's the deal with my sister? How is she doing in college? Her voice came out flat. Your sis, college girl. She's strutting around here like she's in some sort of fashion show. You should see the bags they carry. Notebooks, all bling. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Played for a fool. I was burning with a need to confront them, to yell until I was hoarse. I'd been dialing Lizzie all day, hitting redial more times than I cared to count. The same with Mom. Neither bothered to pick up. Each ignored calls stacked bricks in the wall they were building between us. When I went online hunting for a trace of them, my messages bounced back like I was some stranger. Now I was locked out, and it stung like hell. Hurt simmered and bubbled over into a rage that iced my veins. They'd conned me. The doorbell rang like a warning siren that I didn't want to heed. There on my doorstep, my mother and sister stood, their appearances a bit too polished for a casual visit. I could feel the weight of their expectations before a word even slipped past their lips. Without an invite, they barged in as if it was their right. They settled on my couch and began to look at my living room. Need money for college, Lizzie blurted out not 2 minutes into the so-called visit. Her eyes didn't meet mine, and why would they? Liars have a hard time looking you in the eye. Yeah, that's rich considering, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Diana, you don't understand. What, that you're both liars? I cut her off. My voice was colder than I anticipated. It was odd but liberating. You got no right to talk to us like that, Diana. Lizzie piped up, her voice getting sharp. We're family. That card's expired, I shot back. Listen here. I didn't let her finish. I did for a long time. I listened and gave and got nothing but a lie. We're your blood, and you owe us that much, my sister said, her voice hitching up a notch. I couldn't help but laugh then, not because it was funny, but because the level of their delusion was staggering. You think I owe you for spending my money on everything but what you claimed. For lying, for treating me like an ATM. I fixed them with a look that felt as if it could peel the paint from the walls. There was silence for a moment, and then my mother's face twisted into a scowl. Ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you, done to me, I corrected. My sister stood up. We don't need this. If you're going to be a bastard about helping your family, well, if the shoe fits. I interrupted her, then pointed at the door. Leave. I'm done being your free ride. They were on their feet now, faces red, not with shame, but with anger. You'll regret this, my mother hissed. I already regret plenty, but cutting you off ain't on that list. I walked to the door, holding it open. Get out. As they stomped past me, their parting words were threats about making me pay in ways money couldn't cover. Once they left, the silence in the apartment was heavy, but it was mine and mine alone. I leaned against the closed door after they were gone and exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was done. It should have felt like a victory, but wars with family tend to leave you counting losses more than wins. Life has a funny way of showing you who really cares. Here I am, sitting on the rough patch of grass by his grave, my dad's grave. Well, he wasn't my biological dad, but that never mattered. He treated me like I was his own, gave me support, taught me right from wrong, showed me kindness. Not like my mother or my sister. I stopped picking up their calls, blocked their numbers, cut them off, just like that. Now here I sit, with only the sound of the wind for company. I talked to him, to my dad, telling him about my day, about the tough root canal, or the kid who wouldn't stop squirming in the chair. It feels right, being here with him, peaceful. Hey, Diana, It's Jim from the grave next over. Poor guy lost his wife last year. He's a regular here like me. You're talking to your dad again, huh? Yeah, I say, you know how it is. Jim nods. Sure do. Got to keep the connection somehow. How's work going? Same old, same old. Teeth are teeth, J.I. They don't change much. Jim chuckles. Yeah, I guess teeth are more reliable than people, huh? You got that right. I smirk. I've always liked Jim. Has a way of saying what he means without wrapping it in cotton. I stand up, brush the grass off my jeans, and take one last look at the headstone. See you tomorrow, Dad, I say softly, though he can't hear me. The door of the car closes with a satisfying thud. I start the engine and roll out of the cemetery. The road stretches out ahead of me, clear and open, just like my future, just like my life now. No more chains pulling me back, no more feeling like a human ATM. My life is mine again. I whisper to the rearview mirror, tucking a stray hair behind my ear. I pull into the traffic. My phone's silent these days, but I like it that way. No surprise calls begging for cash, no manipulative messages, just the occasional text from a friend or a reminder for an appointment. When I get home, I crash on the couch. No yelling, no lies, no fake apologies or promises. Maybe I'll get a dog, a big one with soft ears, someone who's glad to see me for me, not for what's in my wallet. Yeah, that sounds nice.